To infinity and outside of your mind in less than a week. That's right, we're talking Lightyear today. Welcome to hell, ladies and gentlemen. Now you may be wondering, why are we talking about this now? A little bit past is due, everybody's talked about it. Well, here's a little thing you should know. Back in the pandemic days, when it first started and things started to go a little bit on the streaming side rather than a theatrical release, it was a lot easier to cover movies and shows and things of that nature because they would release everywhere at once. All you needed was a streaming service and you were good to go. Now that we're back in theaters, it's a little bit different. There's a little bit of a bias. We get here, things here in hell a little bit later. So it is what it is. We make do with it. But today I wanted to talk about Pixar's latest movie. Okay? Now, I'm not going to go through the entirety of the plot, but there will be some spoilers here. So if for whatever reason you have not seen this movie already, please go watch it first, then come back. We'll wait for you. It's all right. We'll wait. But either way, what do I think about this movie? I think it's very simple. I think if you were to consider this as a animated movie on its own, without the context of Toy Story, it is a very passable action comedy, right? I think it's a very passable movie. It's not a terrible movie by any means. Not a great movie by any means either. However, when you tie it to the context of Toy Story, then it makes it a little bit less of a decent movie. And the reason I say that is, at the very beginning, they show you in text very briefly that this movie is meant to take place within the Toy Story universe. That is to say, this is the movie that Andy saw in theaters back then that made him want to get a Buzz Lightyear toy. And for the most part, the story around this movie is okay with that. Like, I could see a kid going there, having a laugh, and enjoying himself, seeing the action and wanting a toy. That makes perfect sense to me. But there's a few details that kind of don't add up. So the whole story revolves around, Buzz and, going on a journey with other space rangers, including Hawthorne, who is kind of his partner in the Space Rangers program. And they land on a planet and he makes a mistake and they get stranded. And so he is trying to figure out a way for them to go back to the stars and get to be Space Rangers again, right? And in doing so, they need to test the hyperfuel. And so he has to keep on making trips to try and figure out a stable fuel source. But in doing so, even though for him it's only a few minutes, for everybody that's staying on the planet that they're on, years pass by. So every time he returns, people are getting older. Time is passing him by. He's missing time to grow relationships, etc., etc., and that kind of starts to weigh down on him. And then we get to the kind of confrontation when things get involved with Zurg, the main antagonist that we've known since Toy Story 1, was part of his universe. Now the problem is that in Toy Story, it is established that for Buzz, it is Emperor Zurg is like his arch nemesis. Is something that an evil alien that he always battles, and that is always after him, and it's not like a resolved issue. The problem that this movie brings up is that Zurg ends up actually being Buzz from like a separate timeline, if you will, where things don't go well for him, and he's obsessed with going back in time, going all the way back, not landing on the planet, not making the mistake that originally got them there in the first place. And so, while it's interesting to have your worst enemy be yourself as kind of for reflective purposes, I think this is the one time where Disney or Pixar or whoever could have actually stuck to the original material and not try to subvert expectations by putting that in. Because I do think it kind of ruins who the character is supposed to be. On top of the fact that, Buzz is not actually voiced by the original, you know, by Tim Allen. He's now Chris Evans, which, you know, to put that aside, Chris Evans actually does a pretty good job. And obviously, the toys don't necessarily have to speak like the character in the movie. How many times have you seen a movie and then you get the toy for it and it has a little button, and then when you press it, a completely different voice comes out? So that makes complete sense to me. Also, the voice of the character when they reanimate doesn't necessarily have to equate to the same voice that the character has in the movie, you know? So I don't see any issues with that necessarily. I think he does a passable job. Or I should say he does a pretty good job given what, you know, the material he's given. I think the animation in the movie is fantastic. That's expected for Pixar, but it's still a lot of really good work went into the visuals of this movie. I think it's pretty amazing. The problem is that the story, like I said, is very bland, very one-dimensional. It has some action to it. The only levity comes in with the part of Socks, which is like a robotic cat pet that gets assigned to Buzz so that he can feel better with the passage of time. And that is probably my favorite character in the whole movie. He has the best jokes, the best lines. He's adorable. He's a cat. I don't know. I can't really say more things about it than that. And the only thing that concerns me in that regard is that there's no way that if this movie was out in the universe where Andy lived, that there wouldn't be a gazillion toys of Socks. Probably almost on par with Buzz. If he was like the main star of the film, there would have been just as many toys of Socks. And there, at least as far as I know, there aren't any references, as far as I can know, for the Toy Story movies showing any kind of thing like that. So it seems like a completely new character that's added. So that kind of doesn't make as much sense. But I'm willing to let that go because it's, you know, the levity of the movie. I think the main aspect that I had an issue with, besides the fact that the whole story kind of went really, really slow and it wasn't like super interesting, the side characters weren't that interesting. The movie was very paint by numbers. It didn't have like a super, super deep reflective message like other Pixar movies do, which is okay. But then at the end of the day, when they have the reveal, like I said, I think it was overall a disappointment because first of all, it's not in the light that you want to see Buzz Lightyear, but also it's not really what you wanted out of the fantasy of him fighting Zurg. I think at least that's not what a lot of fans expected, and that's probably why it's not doing so well. On top of the fact that, you know, going back to the theaters, I think a lot of the new generations are already used to seeing things in streaming, so they want to see it in streaming and not have to go out. But what are your thoughts? I would love to know. Let me know in the comments down below, and hopefully we'll have some more reviews. Next up, I want to actually talk about Black Phone, which is a really good horror film that I got to see. So until then, I'll see you all back in hell.